We can start. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Zeni Vafi from DSO. I am the Deputy Secretary General here at the DSO for Smart Grids, and I have the pleasure to welcome you today and be the moderator of this event. I see people flowing in, so that will be an interesting webinar for us. We organize it with the aim, and we have an interesting title for you, which is the one of first assessing the EU funding for DSOs, but also trying to find out the missing piece of it and come up with solutions. It will be 1 hour, catchy, very catchy and sound webinar, and stay with us until the end so you will have the answer, what we have come through as a solution. So before we just jump into the content, I would like you to go through some housekeeping rules. Since this is a webinar, we always tend to have some housekeeping for everyone to participate in a pleasant way. First, video and will be recorded. We will have a press release after the webinar, so you will see what the outcome will be. Video and audio is only available for online speakers and panelists. And you can put your questions as we go through the presentations in the Q&A, not in the chat box, but in the Q&A. I will be happy as a moderator to take them. Yes, if you can introduce yourself, even better. And of course, we have two speakers, so the question will be addressed to one of them, one or another. And we can start. So what we have here for you is a very nice agenda. So first, I will just explain in a nutshell why we are here today, why we came up with this idea of having a webinar and addressing to you as an audience today. There will be a report presentation of the survey we have run together with Dowel Innovation. Then Rika Venetioki, our member and senior expert at E.ON, will share with you some interesting policy recommendations. And then the floor is all yours to ask questions or things that didn't come across clearly or anything you would like to know, and then we close. So if we stick to the agenda, I just want to share with you that we have worked since September together with Rikat and Karin, the two presenters of today, just to assess what are the funding needs. As you might have heard, there is a lot of discussion right now about investments in the grids, what are the funding mechanisms available, how much are DSOs able to benefit from these funding mechanisms, and what are the things we're missing out, as simple as that. And we have actually run a survey, which the results will be displayed today, and the report will be published in a few days. And we want really to depict the issues and the reason, or let's say the objective we want to achieve via this webinar is first to share the outcomes of the findings with some of you, and I suppose some of you have also been contributors to it, and then find solutions or kind of explore solutions that might be specifically also included in the upcoming action grid of European Union. So therefore, without further ado, I would like to actually see Karin on the screen. So she will be able to share her findings, and then we can move to Rikat. So Karin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Zeni. Let me share my screen. All right, I hope you can see it.
Yes.
Perfect. Then let me start. All right, so I will now present you with the results of the survey we did, as Zeni said, back in September. So the survey was both qualitative and quantitative. Its objective was to investigate how distribution operators are currently accessing public funding, both at the EU level and national level, to finance their project and activities. So it consisted in an online survey and bilateral interviews. That the approach that we followed. The online survey itself ran from mid-September to early October, and we received 54 answers. And then 5 bilateral semi-structured interviews were carried out to obtain additional qualitative information as well as feedback and recommendations about funding. So the report that has been written as a consequence is presented today and will soon be published, as Tseni introduced earlier. So what did we reviewed? We actually went several types of public funding, although the list was for sure not exhaustive. We decided to split the funds into two categories: those managed at EU level, which entail an evaluation by the European Commission or by an EU agency, and most of the time they have consortium that spans across several EU countries. And then the funds that are managed at member states level, either financed by the EU or by the member state itself independently from EU resources. I will not describe these funding instruments in detail now. Actually, Ricard will say a few words about them later on in the webinar, but just I wanted to highlight that in the first category, you can see here that we included the project of common interest, and it's important to say that it's not a funding instrument in itself. And then obtaining the PSTI status only makes DSOs eligible to submit applications to Safe Energy, Connecting Europe facility. But for the sake of simplicity, because it was a little survey to start with, it has been treated together with funding instruments. Also in the second category, we included both national funds and EU funds that are administered at member states level, for instance, through the Common Provision Regulation, which can include, among other, the European Regional Development Fund. And this category also included the Modernization Fund and national funds financed by the Recovery and Resilience Facility. So it's important to note that while these funding sources are addressed collectively, each one is distinguished by unique characteristics. For instance, if you take the Modernization Fund, it's only available in the 10 lowest income member states. So that was to introduce the survey. 41 DSOs for 16 countries, including Ukraine, were represented in the survey. Most of them are large DSOs, 19, but medium and small DSOs were represented as well. So to what extent have these DSOs accessed EU and national funding in the past years is what we wanted to find out. Let's start with funds that are managed at EU level. Large DSOs, as you can see here, represent the largest group of applicants for EU funding opportunities. Every single large DSO submitted at least one application in the past, and almost half of them have submitted at least 5 applications. Out of 8 small DSOs, only 2 applied to EU funding. The lack of knowledge about the available funds, as well as about the process and eligibility criteria, was the main barrier that was identified by small DSOs. Then what are the reasons for applying to EU funding? The main reason is the opportunity to test innovative solutions at reduced risks, and then cooperation of various kinds, cooperation with other profiles, industry and standard organization, for instance, cross-border cooperation, scientific cooperation. And then we also had additional motivation that were provided by respondents, such as government relations, the opportunity to have more visibility towards policymakers, but also the opportunity to speed up implementation of projects. Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe have been the main funding instruments over the past decade for DSOs, with, as you can see, 24 of the surveyed DSOs that submitted applications at least one to Horizon. And among the respondents, 10 DSOs applied to the status of project of common interest. Less than 15% of DSOs applied to Safe Energy, the Innovation Fund, and LIFE. So why is such a difference? Let's look into the pros and cons listed by our respondents for each of these instruments, and let's start with Horizon. So positive side, it was deemed as well-suited, well-focused by most of the respondents that applied. Nevertheless, it was pointed out that consortia sizes are often too large and equipment depreciation rules are unfavorable. PCI was considered as a promising instrument. However, it was criticized for its complicated application process, a lack of transparency in the practical application of the selection criteria for PCI, and also a high administrative burden and a perceived lack of alignment with the specific needs of DSOs. It was also pointed out that it has become more and more complicated to obtain PCI status. You can see here that I have actually merged PCI and CEF in terms of comments because CEF Energy received very similar comments. For Innovation Fund and Life, they both receive rather similar comment that the application is highly complex, but that's often the case with funding instruments anyway. So in terms of experience, which each funding instruments this resulted into the following rating, with the Horizon funding being experienced as the most positive EU funding instruments among the respondents. PCI and CEF Energy have received the least favorable rating. The Innovation Fund, Life, and ERANET, all three received similar ratings actually. Interestingly, DSOs who applied to funds managed by member states had overall a positive experience with the application process itself, although DSOs are not completely satisfied with those funds, but I will come back to that later. In terms of success rates, DSOs have enjoyed the highest success with applications to the LIFE program and with national funding. And on the other hand, the Innovation Fund is the most competitive instrument with the least favorable success rate for DSOs. We finally asked respondents to rate the suitability of EU funding instrument to finance both operational expenditure and capital expenditure on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being very bad and 5 being excellent. Each dot represents one DSO who answered the survey. A strong disparity can be seen between medium DSOs and large DSOs in terms of what they experience, how they rate this support. Large DSOs, who are those submitting the highest number of applications, expressed a lower satisfaction, particularly in terms of OPEX, and medium DSOs on their side seem to be slightly more satisfied with OPEX than with CAPEX, at least instrument to fund OPEX and CAPEX. That was for funds managed at EU level. Now let's look into funds managed at member state level. Similar to EU funding, it is the larger DSOs that are submitting the highest number of applications. However, it's interesting to note that 5 DSOs within this category never submitted an application at all. Countries where none of the survey respondents, be they large DSOs or small DSOs, submitted an application at all, was Finland, Lithuania, Slovakia, and Sweden. So strong disparity can therefore be seen across the member states, and it was not so much the case for EU funding managed at EU level. The main reasons for applying are similar to those presented for EU funding, namely the opportunity to test innovative solutions at reduced risk, scientific cooperation, and cooperation with other profiles. And visibility was mentioned this time as a prominent factor. Respondents were again asked to rate the suitability of funding instruments managed at national level to finance OPEX and CAPEX. Large DSOs have also here expressed the least satisfaction, particularly in relation to OPEX. And for OPEX, both medium and big DSOs are even less satisfied here than with the funding managed at EU level. So then we asked them to point out the hurdles that were specific to funding instruments at national level. Low funding levels were mentioned, as well as inadequate timelines, such as calls stipulating project durations of a maximum of 2 years, which is a bit too short for DSO's project. There are also constraints associated to the scope of national programs that are limiting opportunities for DSOs, or that also can exclude DSOs from those programs. In some countries, such as France, national support programs can be done in the form of loans, which necessitate repayment over an extended period. And this may entail guarantee procedures, which make them very complex for DSOs, especially since they operate within a regulated environment. And finally, DSOs stress unfavorable regulatory treatment of assets financed by public funding. Interviewed DSOs indeed pointed out that national regulations of energy networks require the neutralization of received funds within the revenue framework, thus presenting a major barrier when they engage with national funding. But this is, of course, also valid for EU funding. So those projects still represent a big interest for them and has a clear added value because it gives really impulse to their project and brings cooperation. But this is kind of offset by this unfavorable regulatory treatment. All the comments received through the online survey and the interviews were summarized in a few key findings about what a DSO-friendly funding framework should look like. So let's start with the EU level. Respondents mentioned that this framework should effectively bridge the gap between R&D initiatives and the scale-up and replication of project results. It should facilitate cross-border cooperation, but without requiring physical interconnection, as it's the case for now in PCI. And if this is not required, this would foster more decentralized projects for DSOs. A more efficient application process should also be set up in relevant in 2 stages, also with recurring or rolling call mechanisms to enhance visibility and know what will come in terms of calls in the next years. And finally, funding rates should be more supportive, especially for small DSOs and municipal DSOs. At national level, so respondents suggested that for EU funds governed by the Common Provision Regulation or by the Recovery and Resilience Facility, there should be a specific earmarking for DSOs to make sure that the member states have a specific DSO chapter in those. The EU must also play an active role in overseeing the effective implementation of initiatives and strategy at the level of member states, and when this is relevant, provide really clear guidelines and methodologies. Realistic timelines and higher funding rates were also mentioned. And finally, the simplification need related to the national regulatory environment was highlighted by several respondents. Indeed, several DSOs that we interviewed stressed that it is imperative to cultivate a shift in the mindset of policymakers and regulators, with a recognition that DSOs, in particular the small and the municipal one, cannot secure all necessary financing for the energy transition from tariff-based revenue streams, in particular for the connection of renewable energy assets. And I will finish on those words that were conveyed by the DSOs we interviewed. We have time later on for questions. And also, if you want more details about the survey, please feel free to contact me. You have my email address here. And that's all for me. I hope I didn't take too long, Zeni.
No, thank you, Karine, for the encompassing survey you have run and supporting us in this difficult exercise. Because it's one thing to talk about fundings and then mapping really the problems is another step. So we really, really appreciate your contribution. Before leaving now the floor to Rikat, I just want to mention that I take the occasion also to thank our colleague from EU DSO entity who actually expanded the survey to their membership, because as you know, EDSO represents only the largest DSOs at European level. And coming, I see a question on QA just shortly to capture what is the difference, because Karine was referring during her speech. There is a difference at European level, which comes from regulatory perspective, that there is a difference between the small, big, and medium, and that is only connected to the connected customers, basically. So the small ones, we refer small DSOs when they have clients or customers actually below 100,000. The medium ones, 100,000 to 1 million, and beyond 1 million are the largest one. So I think this serves as a clarification. Nevertheless, we are happy to touch upon it later on. Karine, thank you again for your presence here today.
Thank you, and thanks, Zeni, for the clarification on on the threshold. I forgot indeed to include it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Ricard, and before I giving him, I asked him before we started the webinar, what is your main wish for this webinar? And he honestly said, the best wish would be first to touch with people that have contributed to the survey and kind of reveal what we have come across, which we already did in a way. But then the ultimate wish was really to change things for DSOs in order to capture the financial potential that there is out there, or if we can possibly propose something from the regulation to capture better the needs of DSOs in order to invest and to have upgrading the grid as necessary. So Rika, the floor is yours, and you are ready to share with us some policy recommendations. So please.
Thank you very much for the floor, Seni. I will start presenting as soon as I see the presentation. I can start introducing myself. My name is Rickard Venetjoki. I am working for E.ON in Brussels since 6 years back. I have since then been working with EDSO as an association since day one, basically. And currently we are working on looking into the funding landscape at EDSO. And we have therefore also partly based on the outcome of the survey, we have compiled some policy recommendations for the European Commission. This exercise actually started more than half a year ago. The intention was to work proactively for the next MFF, the next EU budget, which is supposed to start in 2028 until 2034. But while we were doing this work, the European Commission launched, or they mentioned they are working on a grid action plan. Therefore, we needed to speed up a bit because we saw the opportunity that perhaps some of our finds could be addressed already in this grid action plan. And this grid action plan will then be revealed during the PCI Energy Days in Brussels, the 28th, 29th of November, so in roughly 2 weeks. So we have been looking into what are the opportunities for DSO when it comes to funding on the European level. So this slide is mainly focusing on the funds that are more closely connected to the European Union, which don't have too much dependence on member states. And the two programs that has the most independence from member states, I would say, is the Horizon Europe program. The Horizon program, as we saw in the evaluation, in the result of the survey, it is by far the program that is the most popular among DSOs. And there are very few negative things to say about Horizon. I mean, there are some negative things like Karin mentioned, but in general, it is perceived as a very good program. It is, however, supporting mainly costs that can be related to OPEX. So there are not a lot of CAPEX which is being financed from the Horizon. The program which is financing CAPEX is called the Connecting Europe Facility, the CEF. And this program is financing large-scale infrastructure projects, which has an impact on at least 2 member states. So these projects will have to have a bigger impact involving 2 or more member states. This program has, however, it has funded a couple of projects where DSO have been in the lead, but most of the funds are being directed towards the TSO level. Then we have the programs that are getting their budgets from the EU ETS, it's the Innovation Fund and the Modernization Fund. The Innovation Fund can, in theory, suit DSOs, but in general, it's targeting different kind of technologies, such as storage, decarbonization of industry, etc. The Modernization Fund, it's also a very good tool for the ones that are eligible to it. There are only 10 member states in Europe that are eligible to it. I believe the definition is that the member state will have to have less than 90% of the average GDP per capita. So that excludes a lot of the member states, let's say in the west of Europe. Other programs or opportunities, it's the Recovery and Resilience Facility with the more recently launched Repower EU initiative. The Repower EU initiative states that the Commission has the ambition to have solar power as the main source of electricity generation by 2030. And we know that all this solar will have to be connected on the decentralized level. Member states had an opportunity to include a Repower EU chapter to the Recovery and Resilience plans. But according to our findings, not all of them did. I believe from the survey, roughly 50% of the member states did take grids into account when they had the opportunity to do so. Next slide, please. Let's talk about 10E. So the 10E regulation, it sets the rule set for being eligible to submit an application for PCI status. So if you meet the rules in the 10E regulation, you should be eligible to the PCI status. And then if you receive the PCI status, you are eligible to submit an application to the Connecting Your Facility. So the PCI does not really have anything to do with funding. Funding is one of the benefits that you will obtain. Other are that you should have a possibility of getting a fast track to permitting. But getting a PCI status does not imply that you're receiving any kinds of money. It's just that you are allowed to submit an application for funding. This regulation was quite newly revised. I believe the revision started in 2019 and it was formally closed in the beginning of 2022. EDSO was working actively on the file all along. And we saw also some very positive improvements to the regulation. As an example, because these projects, they will have to have an impact on at least 2 member states. And that means that you will have to team up with other DSOs and TSOs in other member states. You will have to have the approval from or the support from the ministry, possibly a signature from the Minister of Infrastructure or Energy. So these projects are quite high level and they get quite a lot of attention, and they are also stirring up quite a lot of dust because they're not easy to just do the internal alignment in one member state and get the support from the national regulator and the ministry. So one thing that made it a bit easier for DSOs to take on this project is that according to the regulation, we no longer need to have the TSOs involved. And this is a quite positive outcome for DSOs. The hierarchy in the grid look different in Europe. In some member states, we will have different layers. So we will have a TSO level, and then you will have a DSO level that is operating on high voltage, and underneath you will have other DSOs that are not really connected to the TSOs at all. So for them that don't have any kind of natural contact point to the TSOs, it can be quite difficult to get the TSOs enthusiastic and trying to set up these quite demanding projects. Another improvement was that we no longer need to cross borders physically. So we are allowed to set up virtual connections. That could be through replication of solutions in one member state to another. It could be with the help of data transfer to improve operations of the grid, for example. And there was also, it is also easier to meet the criteria through sector integration, which has become one of the options for DSOs. What is not on the slide is that we will come to that later as one of the barriers, but DSOs are now also eligible to regulatory incentives. So that was also a major improvement. So when we saw the outcome, which was positive for grids, we had quite high expectations on the PCI list, which is currently being developed by the European Commission, and we are expecting it to be formally approved and negotiated by the end of this year or the beginning of 24. So for this first list under the new regulation, there was only one new project in the category relevant for DSOs. And this project was not even recommended for PCI status. So there will be no new DSO projects on the PCI list, even though we have just recently seen a revision of the 10-year regulation. So we are not doing gas grids at EDSO, we are doing electricity grids, but I believe it's relevant to mention that there was also a new category introduced under the new regulation, which is called smart gas grids. And this category received 4 applications, but none of them were recommended for PCI status either. So I believe that is relevant to mention because it seems like the decentralized energy infrastructure is having quite a struggle currently. Next slide, please. Therefore, we are proposing that there should be an additional program set up which is more tailored for DSO needs on the European level. And we are calling it the Decentralized Grid Facility, the DGF. It even has its own logo now, made by me with the help of AI in 5 minutes. But it becomes more real. So what we would like to see with this new facility is that it will be operating without any interference of TSO projects. We have had a glimpse on the next PCI list, which is currently being under construction. And just looking at some of the projects on the list, we realize that these projects, from a geopolitical perspective, will have higher priorities than DSO projects. I could mention, for example, that there is a very interesting project between Sweden and the Baltics, which is, of course, intended to make us less dependent of Russia. There's another project between Poland and Ukraine. Ukraine will need quite a lot of resources, and this is also an opportunity for the Commission to support the first real project of mutual interest. A third project that is also worth mentioning that we believe is in quite a big competition for DSO projects is that there is now a project between Greece and Egypt. And we saw in the last run for CEF that there was a North African Italian project that snatched more than 50% of the entire CEF budget. So we would like to see that there is a dedicated fund where it's only supporting decentralized projects for DSOs, the one that will have to basically help or make sure that the high ambitions by the commissions are being realized, like having solar as the main energy source of electricity by 2030. And how could this then be set up? I mean, there is a possibility to perhaps expand the Connecting Europe facility. That is an option, but anyone that has followed the MFF negotiations about the budget know that the CEF is object to quite a lot of scrutinization. This is a pot that will where the member states mainly is trying to reduce as much as possible. So that could be a bit of a risky option. And I don't know, but possibly even the 10-year regulation, which was newly revised, will have to be revised once again to realize this. So perhaps having a freestanding program could be more feasible. So we are proposing that this facility is being set up for the next budget period starting in 28, but until then, we could initiate a pilot program starting already in 25 until 27. And this pilot phase could provide valuable insights on how to actually set up the decentralized grid facility in the end. And we would also like to see that there is a program that is not focusing too much on regional differences, because a lot of the funding today is being distributed and money is going towards, let's say, quite a lot of regular modernization, while there are quite a lot of solutions that could leverage from receiving funding, and that are receiving funding from the technological perspective instead. Next slide, please. So clarity from member states, and this is the slide where I would like to address the funds that are not getting their money directly from the EU, but rather the ones that are under the umbrella of the Common Provisions Regulation. So this is where a very big chunk of the European Union's money is being distributed. And I believe the budget currently is over 400 billion euros. I saw a documentary by Deutsche Welle where a commission spokesperson was interviewed, and according to him, roughly 1.5 million projects are being funded under cohesion policy. This is such a large amount of projects that it's simply impossible for the commission to monitor all the projects, and because of that, it's also quite easy that some parts of the value chain are not being stimulated. They are sort of falling between the shares. So we would like to stress the importance of trying to have a holistic view, trying to have some kind of rule set that makes sure that these gaps are being avoided. So what we saw already mentioned, perhaps, but that roughly 50% of the one responding to the survey, the member states decided to have dedicated support for DSOs, while quite often they are supporting additional generation. And everyone knows what happens if we are only investing in generation and not taking the grids into account. We will simply not be able to connect the generation timely. We will create a lot of bottlenecks, and it will simply just be quite a lot of waste of money, basically. So the next time initiatives like this are being initiated, we would like to see that some kind of, let's say, stronger, more specific directives towards member states should be from the Commission. This also goes for the programs that are under the Common Provisions Regulation. We would like to see that there are that member states cannot, let's say, overstimulate generation while not taking the grids into account. And since the CPR, the Common Provisions Regulation, will be revised for the next MFF, we highly recommend to have this in mind. This is not perhaps, you can't perhaps say that for every euro invested in grids, member states need to invest €1 in what did I say? For every euro in generation, there will have to be a euro in grids. It's not that easy because they will be different in different member states. The system will look different. So therefore, our proposal is to use some kind of tool that has, let's say, some kind of legal support. And for that, our proposal is to use the distributed network development plans. So these are not in place yet, but we are expecting them to be when it's time for the next MFF. And they are being developed under the network code for distributed flexibility today. And these network development plans, they will be able to show or give good indications on the status of the grid in relation to generation. Next slide, please. And now we're becoming a bit regulatory technical. So what I'm going to tell you might come as a surprise to many of you. Like the title says, ensure grants benefit regulated businesses. So being successful in receiving grants from the EU or any kind of funding, it is a challenge. It's not easy to be successful. It's not easy to form a consortium, to collect all the data, to submit the application and then be successful. But if in some member states, if DSOs are being successful and they are receiving grants, the grants are being neutralized on the national level. So assets financed by grants cannot be basis for any kind of revenues. And that has the impact on the DSO's result, financial result, that it's either neutral or in many cases even negative, because these projects, additional assets, they are driving additional costs. So you will increase your costs, but you're not able to recover any of the cost related to the physical assets, because these assets will have to be maintained. They will have, at some point in time, have to be replaced as well. So what we have seen in some member states where there are, let's say, positive incentives, is that these projects can receive, for example, additional rate of return on assets if projects have been financed by funding. In some member states, DSOs are allowed to earn regulatory depreciation. And this is the model which we are supporting the most, because this is a model where both the DSO and the customers are benefiting basically equally. So the benefit for the DSO is that they are able to maintain and upgrade and replace the assets once they end their life. And the benefit for the customer is that compared to a normal investment, the customers will not have to pay any kind of rate on return on the assets, meaning that the grant will result in lower tariffs. So our recommendations on this point is that so there is a push in the newly revised 10 regulation that smart electricity grid projects should also be eligible to regulatory incentives. We believe that this needs to be communicated properly to regulators in the member states, because they are not aware of this change, and it's quite difficult to raise that topic individually from the DSO level. So here we're looking for the support from the Commission, and possibly also that some kind of guidelines could be issued to member states. Next and last slide. We are all eagerly waiting for the grid action plan to be revealed in 2 weeks. And as the Commission reveals its grid action plan during the PCI Energy Days in Brussels, it would be pretty neat if they also could give us the news that they are about to, or at least they have the intent to establish a decentralized grid facility. We have been trying to be as constructive as possible, and I mean the Commission knows best themselves how they would like to do this process, but we are proposing that perhaps to start with they could launch a public consultation asking for what are the needs for of DSOs, and that we try to set up this pilot program as soon as possible starting in 25. It would also be highly appreciated if the Commission would announce that there would be an oversight of how electricity grids are being supported under the, let's say, the vast umbrella under the CPR regulation, the Common Provisions Regulation. And then finally, the Commission could emphasize the importance of well-structured incentives, because this lack of incentives is holding back many DSOs in member states, because they can't simply set up these projects that take so much time, so much energy, and with the result that they are basically losing money if they are successful receiving funding. So here we would like to see also some guidelines, and also that the Commission could facilitate the dialogue, and also to have in mind to not leave out DSOs of these, let's say, rounds of discussions, because we are the ones that are living in our reality, and we know our needs, and we know what is needed in order for us to be to receive the support. So yeah, done exactly on time.
Thank you, Rika. Thank you for the excellent presentation. I have to say there is a lot to unpack after all this, what you revealed to us. So please, for the audience, you have one main takeaway for today, which is the decentralized grid facility it's a novelty solution brought by Ricard. He has been putting his hands and thoughts since months on it, and I think the Commission will be very interested. We have presented already the idea, and all eyes, as you have heard already, are on the Commission to reveal the action grid. So I like also the way you ended, Ricard, about a direct call for the Commission to support us in terms of incentives, but also in the future grid investments and what funding they will put out there for us to benefit. Now, I don't know among the audience whether there is somebody from the regulatory side or the Commission, but I will pick one question that it came in the Q&A, because now it's the time to open to you, dear audience, about any question you might have. So the one that is from Ivo Rista, he's just putting their solution or kind of the proposal for a sector alliance in order to have these decarbonization goals to be pursued via this kind of channel, and also maybe to streamline a call for fundings via CEO alliance rather than just a loan. So what are your thoughts, Ricard, on this one? And then we have quite an active anonymous attendee who is spotting our Q&A chat, but please feel free to introduce yourself properly. And so the first question for you, Ricard, and then we move to the second one, which is related to pilot that you proposed. Why you are proposing a pilot program as of 2025, where the MFF seems to be already settled? That is the question. So, yeah, the floor is yours.
As for the question from Ivo Rista, I'm not fully getting it, to be honest. I'm not into the model of how the CEO Alliance is working, but Ivo is also offering to share more about the project and his or her, ideas. So perhaps we can set up a call on that, because it sounds interesting. Because I can't respond to the question because I don't fully understand the model and whether it would be favorable for DSOs. As for the anonymous question, where the budget should come from the pilot program, because the MFF is settled. Well, yeah, exactly. So we have seen previously that money have been dedicated to under the CEF. It was not that long ago that we saw the what is it called? The cross-border. It's the cross-border category for renewables, which was just recently received 1 million euros for a call. So I'm not exactly sure how the Commission is operating, but we have seen they can manage to reshuffle funds when they need it. So why not for this purpose as well?
Yeah, I think the question has been answered, and then there is something, but I think, Ricard, you come across as you were introducing and presenting about whether the PCI status is linked with TYNDP in the first place, and that comes from TNE regulations, so there is no doubt about it. If you want to take a moment to look at this and reply, but otherwise I will open the floor to other participants to come along with other questions.
So at least according to my understanding, so the TYNDP is mainly for the TSOs, and since we don't need TSOs for DSO projects, we don't need to include the smart electricity grid projects in the TYNDP. That is my understanding. So that goes for the TSO categories.
So I think from the Q&A, it seems we have answered all the questions, the one on the difference between the DSOs. Now, Ricard, I just, as we are waiting for other questions to fall in, what will be your best guess about the action plan? Do you believe that our proposal for the decentralization of the grid facility will be incorporated somehow in there, or you still have doubts that the time of action was very short for us to jump in the last train, basically?
I mean, I think we actually acted quite early on this. I mean, we had the PCI summit in Bratislava, which was over a month ago or a month ago. And during this event, during the PCI summit, we did already pitch the idea of the decentralized grid facility. So I believe there has been some time for the Commission to evaluate whether this is a good idea or not. So I understand also the complexity of setting up a new program. That is also why we are proposing this step-by-step process. The Commission could say that they would like to investigate the possibility of setting up this facility, and then also by collect more information through consultation, through interviews. Basically, perhaps do a bit of a continue on the great work by Dowel and taking it one step further.
All right. I think, yes, we have done what was necessary together with Richard for quite some time in order to shape or kind of address this on time with the Commission. And one of the actors that we haven't mentioned specifically and addressed, and I hope they are among the audience as well, is CINEA. They have an important role to play when it comes to CEF and PCI lists. So we have had a lot of exchanges with them. They understood the concerns. They understood why the projects were not getting into the PCI list. Would you have any kind of message you want to convey to CINEA or to the Commission directly today and take this advantage about how to best address DSOs? While we are waiting for the action plan, that it might also be a long-term perspective in the immediate run, kind of shorter action, what you would like to hear from them or them to address for DSOs?
Well, I mean, every time we hear the Commission talk about DSOs, they are recognize the importance of us that we have. We are the ones that will do most of the connection of the renewables, etc. And I believe that we have already in the position paper that I believe was published this week. So what I told you today is a condensed version, basically, of that position paper. And there are recommendations that are quite concrete. So in general, we as DSOs would like to empower the Commission more, to have them have, let's say, stronger directives towards member states for basically everything that has to do about financing and supporting the energy transition, because we've seen that we quite often are being forgotten. So the priorities from the European level are not always the same on the national level. And here I believe that we can get support in several kinds of ways.
Very true. It's true that there is a discrepancy between what's happening at European level and then we end up adhering at European level and national level. So what about the national reports or kind of that they have to be implemented at national level? What do you think they can capture as incentives for the funding?
Which national report are you referring to?
National action report and grid. One question to Richard: should this grid facility also include transmission infrastructures? It's a question that it came in the Q&A from Santiago.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's from Santiago.
Yes.
Should the grid facility also include transmission infrastructure? No, it should not, because there are the TSOs are dominating the connecting your facility as it is today, and that is one of the main reasons why we are asking for this decentralized grid facility.
All right, Santiago, it's a nice try for you to get our friends from TSO in the grid facility, but I think Richard has clear ideas about dismissing this idea, and he has good reasons, I believe. Now,
it is called the decentralized grid facility as well, so yeah.
Makes sense. So What I was referring before in the national energy and climate reports that they have to be actually for each country, they have to be implemented at national level. And so would you think that is a way to get through also the funding?
It could be a way. I'm not completely aware of how this will work, but I mean, any kind of tool or support to run the analysis and finding the ratio between generation and distribution is welcome. And if we're using the distributed network plans, or if we're using the NECPs or whatever you're using, the best tool, or we could also possibly combine different kinds of tools. I believe, just as from my current understanding, that the distributed network plans would be preferable because they will be more affected by, the DSOs will have more control over these, while the NCPs will have more of a member state being responsible for them. But I am not ruling it out that also could be an option.
Thank you, Rika. And maybe we will take the last question, so we need to conclude, unfortunately. So there is another one coming in the Q&A chat. It's about the TOTEX type of network charging system. First question is, how do you evaluate this? And the second one is this provide more freedom for DSOs to choose between network investment, CapEx and OpEx, or just additional burden?
Oh, this is a question which does not really have to do with the event today, but I can try to give a political answer to that. The TOTEX model is, we have different opinions from different members at EDSO. The TOTEX model is an improvement compared to many regulations today. In many regulations today, working with OpEx solutions could be penalizing. And so if with a TOTEX model instead, that is definitely an improvement. Some members have the impression that TOTEX is not a steering model which is strong enough, because in order to actually take the leap of making innovative digital solution part of the, let's say, the daily routine, perhaps the incentives needs to be a bit stronger to start with. I'm going to leave it like that because it's not within the scope of today's webinar.
Thank you, Rika. Thank you to all the audience. I have, fortunately, to close the webinar. I can only thank you and Karin. Karin, if you are among us, I would like you to be shown on the screen again. A proper thank you for what you shared today. For the audience, stay tuned. The full report of the survey will come up. If you want to check exactly the thoughts as Rika shared about the grid decentralization grid facility, you will have a look at our position paper, which was published this Monday. It's in our website. You can screen and scroll down, and then you can see the options and the justifications. So, and I think this is the first attempt we made for knowledge sharing type of webinar, just to share what we come across, but we will not end here. Future webinars or events will be organized in this thematic, and fortunately after the launch of the action grid that is expected to come in 2 weeks' time. So by that, I just want to wish you all a nice afternoon, and thank you again for being with us this afternoon. Bye.
Thank you
again.